Ladies and gentlemen, in this RedGamingTech.com video, we're going to be further discussing the used games fiasco on the Xbox One. I use fiasco because it's really getting a lot of mixed opinions right now. This has been stirred up by the corporate VP, who have been talking to various members of the press and said that Xbox One players who activate pre-owned retail discs will still need to pay the same price as the original buyer in order to access its content. Now I'm going to read an exact quote. Microsoft apparently will always take a customer-centric view. And he said, and I quote, that our plans are very consistent with the way the world works today, which is if I buy a disc, I can install it on my machine, I can play it, and anyone associated with my machine can play it as well. I can give that disc to somebody else, maybe my son, who owns his own Xbox One that's somewhere else in the house. He can install and play it on his machine. I can come over to your house with that disc. I can install it on your machine and we could play it while I'm with you. We have all the capabilities of that game. The moment I go home and notionally take that disc with me, you can no longer have the ability to play that game. But the bits are on your hard drive, so if you want to play that game, you can buy it, and you can go to the online store, buy it, and it's instantly unlocked and playable on your machine. All of the privilege I just described in my house would now apply to yours as well. He then went on to say that they're exactly the same as owning a physical disc, it's just the method of distributing the bits slightly changes. He also said that retailers are important, very important partners to us, and we've had a series of high-level meetings with our retail partners around the world in the last few weeks in advance of today. So our retail partners will disclose of our plans and have been part of our processes and planning for some time. So there were also other questions, including, for example, would Xbox One require an internet connection once every 24 hours? Now, in case you're not really familiar with this rumour, and I realise you may not be, because, well, quite honestly, there have been a ridiculous slew of rumours right now, but in relation to this one, it's very simple. I want to play a single-player game. My internet goes down, I'm moving house. You get the scenarios, I'm not going to bother to bore you with all of them, you can make your own up. Okay, what happens? Let's say I'm moving to a different ISP. What happens then? Well, you need to connect once every 24 hours to play your single player games, according to this rumour / theory / whatever you want to say. Now, rumours are really conflicting right now. Harrison has said that Microsoft have not made specific announcements of the details on this, and has also commented that, and I quote, Xbox One is designed to have an internet connection. It does not require an internet connection to be on at all times. But many of the great features and capabilities of the system are unlocked via connection to Xbox Live or the cloud, so that you could do things you expect to become unlocked. If your internet connection is interrupted because of a local outage, many but not all of the features of the game content you own you'll be able to use, but not all of them will be uniquely online experiences. BBC iPlayer, Netflix, whatever will not work as you would expect. Blu-ray movies and single-player games that don't require an internet connection to Xbox Live will work. I think it's pretty rare that an outage-related internet connectivity to be more than a few seconds or minutes, so I don't think it will ever impact on someone's ability to use the system. But in a separate interview, Kotaku was speaking to him, and he said basically that you need to connect within every 24 hours. I'll read the exact thing out. Kotaku have asked how regularly Xbox One will require an internet connection while playing a single player game, and Harrison responded, I believe it's every 24 hours. And he also elaborated more information on the Xbox official news site that said Xbox One does not require to always be connected, but Xbox One does require a connection to the internet. We've designed the Xbox One to be your all-in-one entertainment system that is connected to the cloud and always ready. We're designing it so that you can play games and watch Blu-rays, live TV if you lose your connection. The problem is with this, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. maybe it's because I grew up when there were the Genesis around, well, there was the Genesis around. Maybe it's because I grew up when, I don't know, PC games didn't really require this, but I just don't like these requirements. I just don't. There's many reasons for this. I mean, when I was younger, I used to take my console around a friend's house for 2 or 3 days, and I didn't even bother to hook it up to the connection. I literally used to take my Xbox around a friend's house. I do mean Xbox One, Xbox 360 as well. I used to take it around their friend's house, and we weren't bothered about playing online. I took it round my friend's house to play, games like SmackDown or, you know, fighting games or whatever, stupid fun times basically. Or there were even times that I took my whole Xbox 360 and even a HD screen around my friend's house to play BioShock, the original, and we did the same to play a few other games as well. In other words, we would play the games together because we're really excited about this title. And same thing for PlayStation 2. I took round another friend's house and we were playing Kingdom Hearts together. And so on. I'm not going to bother and regale you with all my tales of all this stuff. And I realise that this is the minority, but come on now. I own the bloody thing. Why? I just don't like this. I'll be completely honest. Let me start again with some English. What really worries me as well is that Sony are not being stringent with their requirements. Now, okay, Microsoft have said that we have the ability to use that disk anywhere in the house. Now, I'm assuming that is not simultaneously, but once again, a lot of these details are really sketchy at the moment, and it seems to be going up and down because so many different reports are coming in, and some of it is slight misquotes maybe, some of it is a theory, some of it's opinion, some of it's rumor, some of it's questions from a developer that isn't exactly an official one. It's really hard to know. But let's assume that it's reasonable. Let's assume that I am living at home with my brother, and my brother wants to play, I don't know, a game that I've borrowed. Okay, this is probably the same for many kids growing up. Even though I didn't grow up with a brother, but whatever. So that's reasonable. I don't have any concerns or problems or issues with that. Because, well, it's fair. You buy one copy of the game. There are certain games where this hasn't been the case. For example, Command & Conquer 1 on the PlayStation. For the link cable, you got 2 discs. You can actually use two PlayStations, 2 TVs, and 1 copy of the game because there were 2 discs, and you could play skirmish mode with your friend if you so wish. The same thing for a couple of other games as well. And there were a couple of slightly interesting ways to actually play games like Doom, link cable with only 1 disc as well, but I'm not going to go into that. That's okay, but this whole used game thing, I don't like it. It has many different implications. The first is that when the console is first released, I can see a lot of people getting caught by this, especially with retailers that aren't particularly honest. Now, obviously, big retailers it's not going to really affect, but I could see the eBay market just going crazy, especially the first couple of months of the system's release, and a mother has bought little Johnny a game from eBay or whatever because it has such potential for abuse. So that's one. It's almost like serial keys off a PC. I don't know if you guys have ever had or know anyone that's this happened to, but I've heard stories and I have had a couple of friends who've bought PC games and the code has been used. So in other words, someone at the store maybe or whatever has somehow or another opened up the manual or looked at the manual, stolen the key, put it back, and basically, unbeknownst to that person, the person has bought the key and it's been used. Another option, of course, could be random key generators. Sometimes they do get lucky and they do sometimes work. Obviously not very cool for the person who's bought the game. But I don't really like this whole online thing. I don't like the requirement. Maybe that's just me being really archaic, if you will. And I understand that, of course, some services do require an internet connection, okay? It's like, if I want to make a call on my cell phone, but my, signal drops, I can't make a call. If I want to watch Netflix, just for example, and my internet connection goes down, I can't watch Netflix. That's all cool. I understand that. That's fine. If I break my leg, I'm not going to be able to walk down to the store, am I? That's okay. I understand there are certain limitations on this. But at the same time, that's because you need X to do Y. In other words, I need X. In other words, I need an internet connection to watch Netflix. Not because Netflix has some DRM or whatever. It's just because it's a streaming service. In other words, I need an internet connection because that data is not physically on my system. There is no way for me to download all of the data. I mean, just as a slight aside, by the way, from what I understand, Netflix uses Amazon's cloud-based services. From what I understand, this is a slight aside, I understand that they put all of their stuff on S3 containers on their cloud, and then that's distributed via rights management depending upon the country that you are in. So in other words, if you live in the US, you have different access to me in the UK or someone else in Canada. Similarly, if I am in the UK and I have a UK account and then I was to take a plane flight to America, I can actually log in using my UK account and get all the stuff from US Netflix. Similarly, if I was to then take a plane to, say, I don't know, Canada or France or wherever else Netflix is, I don't know all the countries, the content would change just based upon the rights of that country. So I understand all that. The stuff is held on Amazon servers. Let's just call it Netflix servers because they're leasing them after all. And that's the end of it. So if I want to watch an episode of Bones or whatever's on there, I have to just stream it. So if my internet goes out, okay, there is some buffering maybe going on, which maybe puts a small amount of data ahead if my internet connection just craps out for a second or whatever. But generally speaking, you get the idea. Okay, that's not the case with this. Now, Steam, it's very similar. Now, as far as I understand it with Steam, which of course is the PC Games Digital Distribution network, I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with it, but still. You, of course, can buy games. I'm just going to quickly briefly explain this, just in case you're not PC gamers or whatever. You, of course, buy games, which may or may not be Valve titles. For example, Capcom put their games on there, Bethesda, and so on. You buy the games digitally, you download them. You do basically get a virtual key. And indeed, you can actually go to other websites and buy keys which will not work on Steam. You can actually buy physical copies which activate on Steam as well. And indeed, a lot of games now actually have, basically activation via Steam only. In other words, it requires a Steam account. Similarly, you need to activate your title usually via Steam. So in other words, to initially turn on that game, enable it, so on, you need a Steam connection. I'm talking generally as certain games are more forgiving, some games are more stringent. As far as I understand it, for say Dragon Age with the DLC, you actually need an internet connection at all times. I'm not 100% on that though. Regardless, if you then were to, be travelling abroad, for example, and you don't have an internet connection, your internet goes out, whatever reasons, I'm not going to bother to list them. Well, you could play it whenever you want. It doesn't matter if it's 1 day, it doesn't matter if it's 3 days, it doesn't matter if it's 3 weeks. As far as I understand it, some people have claimed, I've been Googling around, you feel free to do the same thing. Some people have claimed a couple of months, actually. One person even said 6. Now, obviously certain games, if you want to play more games, you want to add those games, then you're going to need an internet connection. That's fine, that's fair, that's cool. Because otherwise, I could take my game, let's say I've bought, Killafron 3000, I buy Killafron 3000, but I just create an offline mode on Steam, and I was to give you the code for Killafron 3000, I was giving my brother a code for 3000. I don't know why I keep saying I have a brother, I don't bloody have a brother, whatever. But let's say I was to give, 15 of my friends a serial code, my serial code, let's say the serial code is ABC, you would be able to activate your Steam account with ABC because, you know, how else would it verify? So of course it needs online. I have no problems with that. But for consoles, it just feels a little bit, I don't know, just a little bit off. Now, I do understand that there will be some cloud-based functionality in the games before anyone comments. Some people have said, some developers have said that cloud-based computing, for example, the cloud will be able to do computational basically computational help for the console. So let's say, for example, the system is struggling in a couple of years' time, whatever, then theoretically some of that load will be able to be passed off to the cloud. I'm curious to see exactly what can and what cannot be passed off, because certain things obviously will not be able to happen. In my opinion, maybe unless they've got some really advanced way of handling the graphics or something or another, I don't see how graphics can be, unless maybe they're partially streamed in. Maybe that could be one way to handle it. So in other words, certain elements are streamed. Maybe AI, for example, for your teammates could be streamed in. That type of thing I can understand. But honestly speaking, for other titles that just don't require it, I just don't like the idea of the console being on offline. However, once again, Microsoft seem to be really uncertain about some of this stuff, and it's obvious that they are still trying to narrow some of it down. In regards to the used games thing, honestly speaking, as I've said in other videos, it doesn't affect me. Why? Because I simply just don't buy used games. It's that simple. I just don't find myself ever wanting to. In the UK, as I've mentioned dozens of times, there's not that much difference between used and new. And I would rather, out of principle, buy a new game, know that it's 100% going to work, because I've had some bad experiences, I've mentioned before in other videos, with used games, and that is including from big stores, by the way. And I'd rather know that that money is going to developers, because I want to support the developer and also want to support the platform that I am buying on. So that's one of the reasons I buy PC games, that's one of the reasons I buy PlayStation games, whatever, because I want to support not only the developer but the platform itself. In other words, your sale goes towards them making a second game or a third game or whatever. It also helps drive the industry. Like, a lot of people complain about Call of Duty selling well or whatever, but one of the reasons, or should I say, they're making another Call of Duty, but it sells well. You know, you want a game to do well, buy it. You know, you want your sequel to, you know, a certain game. That's the ultimate way, is it has to do well financially. And like it or not, you know, a lot of people get caught up in the creative vision of gaming and all of this, but in reality it's a business. You may not like that, you might think it's a bit cold harsh truth, but when you're seeing it's a Mia Mario on screen, and it's all marketing. You know, Nintendo want their pound of flesh from you, same as EA. And some companies are a bit nicer about it, no doubt about that. But the reality is, if you're an employee of, let's say, Electronic Arts, and let's say your title just doesn't go well, and they say to you, well, I'm sorry, John, but the title sold absolutely abysmally. In actuality, we owe our creditors $300 million from the last title. And you say, well, gosh, that's terrible. And they say, well, that means we actually cannot pay you. So, sorry, John, you're going to not have salary for the next couple of years while we're trying to pay off this $300 million. It's not going to happen, really, is it? In other words, well, you expect to be paid for the work, and that's really what games developers do. Games are becoming increasingly expensive to develop. It's that simple. Games are becoming increasingly expensive. That's why that Sony are so bloody happy with this whole, or should I say, Sony developers, in other words, game developers who are creating stuff for the PlayStation, really happy with how the PlayStation is put together, because it's a lot smoother. The hardware, it's a lot easier to use, and all of this is extremely important, because ultimately speaking, if you're fighting to get a title working on a system, it's costing you more money. Every day that you are not releasing a product is costing you money. Whether it's Bill the programmer or Tanya the graphics artist, every day that they are struggling to make a polygon model fit on screen because of the limitations of the hardware or whatever, it's costing them more money. Therefore, they want to get a product out as soon as possible. And this is another reason, by the way, the bugs happen, but this is a wider topic. The problem is that used games do take away from that, and so I can be somewhat sympathetic to the cause. I am not saying that publishers and developers aren't getting somewhat screwed over in this whole thing, because while we are bargain hunting, I also understand that it's very tempting to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to trade this game with my friend, but the reality is it doesn't help a publisher or developer. Most of the time, if it's something like Call of Duty, they've already made their money. However, smaller developers or games that don't sell quite as well, and that yet we want another title. For example, Bulletstorm. I'd love another Bulletstorm to be released. I quite like it. It's not a perfect game by any means, but it just didn't sell well. And that's not to say that if piracy in used games hadn't have happened, that it would have sold well enough for them to have created another title. I'm not saying that at all, but it certainly didn't help anything, especially used games. So yeah, in that respect, piracy and used games are the same. In other words, the publisher and developer do not get any more money. The difference is, of course, that there is a chance that you will maybe pay money for online passes. However, Electronic Arts have even gone on record and said that, well, online passes are not popular. It's that simple. People hate them. So yeah, it's really interesting right now what's happening in the market. And I don't really know exactly how people are going to take this. I'm worried because I don't want people to write the Xbox off because of restrictive requirements. Most of the time, I think PC gamers are actually going to accept the Xbox One a lot more readily than console gamers. Maybe if you're a big Xbox fan or whatever. But if you're on the fence and you're a PC gamer, you may be more willing to accept it because you're more used to how the system works with Steam or whatever. Although Steam's system is a little bit more relaxed, but obviously right now some of the time limits and so on are still up in the air. In other words, it could be from 24 hours, they could raise it to 24 days, they could raise it to 24 months, it's still not unknown. Anyway, I think that's just about it for this particular video. I know it's been a fairly ranty one, but I would be curious about what you guys think anyway. So leave comments as you would expect, and you can reach me directly on facebook.com/redgamingtech, or you can inbox me should you so desire. I'm going to get going, and so take care of yourselves. Bye for now.